Like a lot of collectors, when Dark of the Moon came out, I was already sick of the movie aesthetic and the exact same character designs getting toy after toy after toy, and oh my god, are they really making another Bumblebee Deluxe? That said, anytime I picked up a Dark of the Moon figure, I found the engineering was actually way better than it was in Revenge of the Fallen, and that's going to be true of today's offering. So we're going to take a look at the deluxe version of Optimus Prime from Dark of the Moon. As you can see, he is your standard movie Optimus Prime semi-truck, flames and all, and fairly well decorated considering he is a tiny little semi-truck. He's cast mostly in the blue plastic, but there's a little bit of red here and there. The front end is red, for instance, and you can see a lot of the flame all over him, on the doors, on the roof, and of course the blue flame in the front with the gold highlight. It's actually a very nice paint job. I mean, it gets all the necessary details in there and just really pushes the Prime aesthetic across. It's a good job. You know, there's really not a whole lot more to say than that. If you like the flames, if you don't like the flames on Optimus Prime, you know, it's another movie toy that's not going to be for you, as many movie toys were. There's a ton of silver on him, too. I mean, the smokestacks, all the fuel tanks, and the steps up here, toolbox on the side, and, of course, over here in the front, where they tried very hard to mold in a tiny little Autobot symbol. It's kind of mushy, but they tried. You can tell they tried. And all the details in the front are nicely molded in. A lot of subtle molding, like all the rivets up here in the sun visor. And here on the side doors, you can see the handle. You can see little indents. There's all kinds of little rivets and all kinds of screws and such all over molding this toy. So, give them credit. They did a pretty good job making sure this toy was fully detailed. It was an Optimus Prime. You know, you're not going to skimp out. Even the hubs have been painted silver, which gets rarer and rarer to actually find these days. So, like, all around, it's a fairly good representation of movie Optimus Prime. You know, there's not a whole lot to say about it. There's no major trick. It rolls well. That's about all I really ask. Now, there are some little things, like most of the movie Primes, once you get to the rear section, it kind of falls apart aesthetically, because you can start to tell where all the robot mode parts are hidden. You can see added pipes and things that wouldn't normally be exposed in the truck. Of course, there's the gap where the legs are separating, and these big sections that don't have any panel closing them off. Where I give the credit to the designers is actually molding in the trailer hitch, where a lot of Optimus Prime toys just like have the feet just sticking out straight from the back. They actually went to the trouble of transforming the feet into something actually useful. Like, I forget if a trailer actually came out that fit on that trailer hitch, but it's there. They tried. And there's also little things, you know. The windows are translucent, and the side mirrors here are going to be tabs once we get to robot mode. That's some clever double usage. But yeah, I am quite the fan of the vehicle. You know, I'm tired of the movie aesthetic, but I have to admit they did a really good job molding this toy. And there's also these little peg holes at the top, which we can actually stick his mech tech weapon into, and holy crap, that is a big cannon. Okay, so if you're like 5.5 to 6 foot human is like there, and you get, this is like the biggest cannon you can imagine ever being mounted on a vehicle. So it's a little bit silly. It's a little bit ridiculous, but hey, there's transforming robots from another planet, so ridiculous is kind of in the DNA of the series. Let's get this guy into robot mode. We'll see how much more ridiculous it gets, and I'm going to start by unpegging the legs and getting them separated from here. We can also pull this front section out, get it separated. Gotta keep it separated. Get that pinned up here. I'll go ahead and transform the legs now, which, unlike some Deluxe Primes that I've reviewed, actually does have a leg extension that goes in and out, lets the legs collapse in vehicle mode. Not saying anything. So, feet fold up quite nicely. 1, 2, and 3. And the rear section is now very nicely formed feet. Now, if we get this parts here, hang on, we'll do this section next, so I can get this out of the way. That all comes across, and I'll go ahead and rotate the torso around because I want to save a particular step for last. Fold that up, and these get folded up to the top. Arms get folded down, and from there we can split open and reveal the head. A little bit of epic transformation for you. You gotta save the head reveal for last, don't you? You really do. So that is our Dark of the Moon Optimus Prime, the deluxe version in robot mode. If I can get him to stand up. There we go. As you can see, he's actually a very passable movie Prime for a deluxe size. He's got a lot of the shapes right. The proportions are pretty much spot on. A lot of the important details are there. It does a really good job, surprisingly. Of course, if we take a look at the head, it's shock and awe, an Optimus Prime head. Now, it is the masked version, which most of them are, but you never know. It's worth pointing out every time because they were kind of prone to switching between mouth and faceplate. So, I always prefer the mouth. I always prefer the faceplate, rather. Just because, that's the Optimus I grew up on. It kind of reconnects. There's a little bit of light piping in the back of the head, but it's one of those colors that doesn't really work too well, and the eyes aren't too big in the first place, so it's kind of hard to get it to shine through. Proportionally, again, it is just spot on. It's really nice, and color-wise, they did a pretty good job. I mean, I like that they didn't have to cheat on the chest. That was good, and that they actually slant the chest the way it actually is on the movie model. That's all well and good. There's other molding subtleties that I like those weird gray shoulder things that pop up from the top of his chest. I don't know. I don't know what they are, but they did mold them to the inside of those panels to kind of give you some semblance of them, even though they are not completely present here. So that's a nice little attention to detail. You can see on the inside, just in general, there's a heavy amount of tech molding. Like someone good at dry brushing could go nuts on something like that. And in general, there's a lot of really deep molding, as a lot of movie toys do. A lot of mechanical detail in throughout his midsection. We can see in the thighs, we got inner panels and wires, and it all kind of blends down into all the detail that the truck mode was showing through. I will say, paint-wise, a lot of it did go to vehicle mode. There's only a little bit more in the robot mode. A little on the thigh, a little on the hips, and of course the face. A little bit of red on the arms, but the arms are pretty much where the bare plastic is really showing itself. I really could have used these molded in a more appropriate color or painted a little bit to match the movie model a little bit better, because they just seem bare. And almost as if they don't fit with the rest of the toy, just because it's red and blue and silver, and all of a sudden the two gray arms hanging off. So it's a little bit of a downer, but it's not a terrible loss. It's not too big of a deal. Now, you did notice as I was transforming, he's got a bit of a balance issue unless you position his legs correctly. Movie toys tend to want to have hips, back, pelvis first type thing going on. Doesn't really have any heel spurs to speak of, unfortunately. So nothing to really counter that backpack of his. It's really unfortunate because it's like the one deterrent to the toy is he does have this big shell that was the front of his vehicle mode just hanging off of his back like that. It's no worse than the original Voyager Prime movie toy had. I've seen worse kibble on movie primes. So it's not terrible, but yeah, he needs some heel spurs. So you got to lean him forward a little bit. You got to have his arms a little bit outward just to counterbalance the weight a little bit. But yeah, it's an annoying thing if you're trying to get just the right pose. Speaking of, we can pose this guy quite a bit. We do have his neck on a swivel, which, yeah, it kind of gets in the way of all the chest panels around him, but, he can, He can turtle up if he needs to, so that's always an option. Ball jointed shoulders, bicep rotation, 180 degrees of elbow. That's good. No waist articulation. But we do have ball jointed hips, we do have a thigh swivel, and we have knees that go just beyond 90 degrees, which I like. And you do have the foot that's capable of tilting thanks to how it transforms. Again, I really like the engineering that went into the feet. So yes, it is an Optimus Prime that can get into all those movie action poses that you so want him to get into, assuming you want him to get into them. If not, then that statement really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Accessory-wise, of course, we do have the MechTech weapon, which I'll show you, but I'll also point out that he does have C-clip ports just for your 3mm swappable weapon gimmicks that were going on around the time. Not too many of them on this figure, but hey, they tried. You do have some extra ports for weaponry. You can have on the forearm as well as in the hand, which is where we will go ahead and peg in his MechTech weapon. It's not a bad one. I mean, for Prime, it's a decent-sized rifle. This particular one is always a little weird because, like, I think a lot of MechTech weapons have this, where the gun itself is absolutely massive, and then you get this tiny little barrel, this itty-bitty little thing. Like, the whole thing looks like a massive, just like a hand cannon, and then it leads into a pea shooter. However, if we take the targeting scope here and pull it back, whoa, and actually hold it still, we get a flip-out orange axe, which is very appropriate to any Optimus Prime, even a movie one, who typically doesn't use an axe. It's not bad. It's kind of weird how it just kind of comes out from the side and slaps the opponent instead of slashing down at them. The downside is, of course, there's no way of locking it in place. I think this is the downfall of most MechTech weapons, where you really wanted them in that flipped out, much cooler weapon mode that they could turn into, and then you find out that it doesn't lock into place and you really can't do that, which sucks. So that was always the downside to those gimmicks. But I do like that the gimmick is completely external on this toy. I mean, aside from head reveal, etc. Because it does allow the toy to be a lot cleaner. It doesn't have to allow for space for the gimmick to function and work, which means it gets to be a much better action figure and toy as a result. And that is pretty much how I view the Deluxe Dark of the Moon Optimus Prime. He does have a few faults. Yeah, he could use a little bit more paint on the arms, and that backpack is a little bit obnoxious when you're trying to get him to stand up. But I think it shows just how good the engineering could get. I mean, in the original movie line, think of how much backpack the Voyager or even the Leader had just to compensate for that design. And in a few years, they could get it down to a deluxe size like this and make a perfectly clean and suitable toy out of it. It's actually quite impressive in a way. So yeah, I'm actually a fan of the toy. It's one of the few movie primes I've allowed myself to keep as I've whittled the collection down over the years, and he'll probably be sticking around. If you're a fan of movie prime, he's a perfect desk size version of the movie character. Now, if we had one of the newer prime, at least we could stay current, but don't know this rate.